The title of the bill, I think, should make clear what we're trying to achieve here. And I think for the vast, vast majority of people out there who are impacted by the current housing crisis, the need for a bill that would reduce the absolutely extortionate, I would say frankly obscene and completely unaffordable rent levels in this country is more than patently obvious. So this bill attempts to do that, to bring rents back to levels that would actually be affordable for ordinary working people in this country, because they have reached a level where they are utterly unaffordable. And the consequences of that, for some, are utterly disastrous, with now record numbers of families and individuals and children actually forced into homelessness, overwhelmingly because they simply cannot find anywhere that is affordable. Within the HAP limits, if they're eligible for housing assistance payment, and of course then there are huge numbers of people who aren't even eligible, who desperately need help meeting the extortionate rents that are being charged, but because they've creeped a few euros over the income eligibility threshold are not entitled to any support and are expected to pay rents that are off the Richter scale in terms of affordability for the vast, vast majority, not just of low earning workers, but for even people on pretty decent wages and salaries. So that's what this bill is trying to do. It is a matter of absolute urgency that something of this sort is done, and the manner in which we do it is the following. We are proposing that a national rents authority would be set up, and that authority would ensure that landlords cannot charge more in rent than 25% of median household income, either the national median household income or the local median household income, whichever is the lower. Because we don't obviously want a situation where people in low income areas would be charged rents based on the income in very high income areas. But the broad principle is that people are not spending more than 25% of their income on putting a roof over their head. We are proposing that any newly constructed house, once this bill is passed, that is going to be rented out, or apartment, would immediately be subject to this rent control and could not charge more, the landlord could not charge more than the median household income as set by the National Rents Authority. For rental property that is out there at the moment, which may be charging, and is almost invariably charging very considerably more than that, they would have 1 year to bring the rents back to that level, and then all rental property would be subject to that rent control. We make an exemption for luxury properties because we frankly do not want to control the rents that are paid by the super rich, where they might rent out luxury penthouses. We have no particular interest in protecting their rents or ensuring that they pay rents that would be far lower than their income would allow. We're interested in protecting rents for ordinary people. So that is what the bill sets out to achieve. Now, the need for this is self-evident. Average national rents are now in excess of €1,500 a month. That means you need about €17,000 a year just to pay your rent, which is what, about 45% of median income you're having to pay on the national rents. But the picture gets far, far worse when you're looking at Dublin, where the average rent is now €2,000. That's €24,000 in after-tax income required just to pay the rent. That is more than 50% of national median household income, is what is being asked for. In my area, it gets even worse, where in the last 6 months, average rents were €2,600. Absolutely obscene levels of rent. This is totally unsustainable, and of course the consequences we can see with the homeless figures rising week on week. And of course, the big feature of the surge in homelessness that we're seeing at the moment, in almost all of the cases that I'm dealing with, is these are people who are working that are being made homeless. Often 2 people in a household working. They still can't afford the rents out there, and in many cases are now not eligible for social housing support because this government and previous governments for 10 years now have refused to raise the income eligibility thresholds in what is clearly a deliberate strategy to make it look as if there's less people in need of social housing support, when in fact it should be self-evident, it is self-evident, there's more people than ever before need social housing support. But the actual proportion of households that are entitled to social housing support, as the ESRI recently documented, has dropped and dropped dramatically. So whereas 47% of households 10 years ago were eligible for social housing support, that figure by 2019 had gone down to 33%. And we don't have figures for what it is now, but it is clearly well south of that. Well south of that. So the number of people who are getting help is less than ever before and reducing constantly in a stealth cut, whereas the need for that support is greater than it has ever been before. And we are facing a dire situation for huge numbers of families. That this is a uniquely disastrous failure of government in this country is also equally evident. The ICTU, in their recent publication on the social wage, show that accommodation costs in this country are 78% higher than the EU average. 78%. Whereas rents have gone up by about 13% across Europe over the last decade. Here they have gone up by over 70%. In my area they've gone up by over 100%. So this is a unique failure of Irish government, way beyond the failure of any other government. And the government yesterday, when we raised this issue with the Taoiseach, the government said this won't fly. This is what did he say? Illiterate legislation. You couldn't possibly do that. But strangely enough, they do it elsewhere in Europe. Very odd, isn't it? Where they have managed to succeed in preventing this kind of dire housing crisis and these extortionate, obscene increases in rent levels. It's not that the rents haven't gone up in Europe, but they haven't gone up anything like to the levels that they've gone up here, because they have rent controls. In France, they have recently introduced further rent controls where essentially, if they see rent levels reaching levels that are beyond what are affordable for ordinary people, they come in and cap them at maximum rents. Similarly, in the Netherlands, where rents are too high, they actually have the legal power to move in and reclassify housing as social housing and to charge social housing rents. In Germany, they have a rent control regime where if in particular areas rents are way out of sync with rents in other parts of the country, they can move in and control the rents, cap them and bring them back down to levels that are reasonable. In the United States, they have multiple forms of rent controls. So the idea that this can't be done is just not true. Are we open to amendments, tweaking, how we do this? Of course we are. But what we want to establish here is the urgent need and the viability of introducing a regime that ensures that people can actually afford the rents that are being charged out there. It is done elsewhere, it can be done. The reason the government doesn't want to do it here is the same reason we have a housing crisis in the first place, because their housing policy, their rental policy, is being dictated by propertied interests, by developers, by speculators, by investors, not by the needs of our people for secure, affordable rental accommodation.